All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Welcome. Marvin Gaye, the great Marvin Gaye. Welcome to The Tonight Show. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. Welcome to Equity and Ecology, Strategies for More Accessible and Sustainable Community Spaces. I'll be your host this afternoon. If you're joining us from San Francisco, if you're joining us from the East Coast, I'll be your host tonight. My name is Thomas Namara. I am the Southeast Area Manager at San Francisco Parks Alliance. Thank you for joining us this session as part of the 2021 Public Space Summit. I'm super excited to get this session going and convene this special group. We're gonna have a great, exciting conversation. But before we dive in, because we're online, I do want to mention a few tech considerations before we begin. So if you haven't done so already, please remember to mute yourself so we can hear our panelists clearly when they start speaking. If you have any questions for me or the panelists, please put them in the chat box below at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to touch on a few of them at the end of our session. So we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A. And if you prefer to see everyone's beautiful faces, you can go to the top right corner of your screen and select gallery view. That way you'll see everyone, or you can do speaker view, whichever one you prefer. And I imagine at this stage of shelter in place, we're all feeling a little bit of Zoom fatigue, and it's harder to stay engaged when we're not in person. We're doing these types of sessions online. So please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. And I'm going to invite our guests to introduce themselves. So using the chat box below, please comment where you're coming from. Tell us if you're coming from San Francisco, what neighborhood you're joining us from. If you're not from San Francisco, or you're not in San Francisco, where you're joining us from. And if you live by an urban community garden or farm, tell us which one it is if you're in San Francisco. And then if you prefer, the last thing I'll ask is tell us in the chat what the word equity means to you. And so I'll leave a couple of seconds for our audience members to do that in the chat box below, just so our panelists can see, can look at who we're talking to this afternoon. So while you're doing that, I will go ahead and I will introduce the session. So the focus of today's session is really about exploring the challenges and opportunities of creating sustainable and equitable community garden spaces, community green spaces. For this particular session, I want to focus on urban gardens and farms as the venue to talk about equity in our park system. Urban gardens and farms and green spaces are a source of neighborhood empowerment, and they have enormous benefits on our health and our well-being. Urban gardens and farms help us to address food deserts and promote a healthy lifestyle. But they are also expensive to implement and maintain. They demand a significant amount of care and daily attention. They need knowledgeable garden stewards and skillful stewards who can visit the site nearly every day. They need space, and especially in San Francisco, right, a densely populated city in the midst of a housing affordability crisis. And while we've made great strides in the last few decades to address inequality in our park system and open the doors to communities who were previously shut out from planning their community green spaces, we have a lot of work to do. Our work isn't finished. We need to thoughtfully and carefully consider if our community green spaces are really accessible. And we also need to examine every facet of what it takes to construct and, more importantly, sustain community green spaces in San Francisco, right? We hold ourselves to the standard that every San Francisco resident, regardless of income, race, gender, should have the same opportunities and resources to create urban farms, urban gardens, and community green spaces in their neighborhoods, right? So I like to pose the question or questions to our panelists in the audience to frame this conversation today. So can anyone in San Francisco who really wants to start, transform, or improve their community green space in San Francisco do it? can they do it, right? Have all the barriers, not just the physical barriers, but the environmental, social, and economic barriers been removed? And have we met the needs of our underserved communities and given them the resources and the capabilities to create community green spaces on their own? So I want our audience and the panelists included to think about those questions for our panel today. And so, like I said at the beginning, we're going to use urban gardens and farms as the arena to explore this question because they are so dynamic as green spaces. But the goal of this session is to leave with a few strategies on how you can make your community green space more accessible, equitable, and inclusive. My hope is that you will leave not discouraged, but with a better understanding of the social, environmental, and economic barriers to be aware of, so that you and your neighbors can create a truly inclusive and diverse space. So to tackle these questions, I'm extremely excited to get this panel together. This is an amazing group of community leaders and organizers, and I've gotten to know this group during my time as Southeast Area Manager. They do some incredible work here around San Francisco. So I will start by having the panelists introduce themselves, their name, pronouns, title, and what the word equity means to you. So Ling, can you start us off?
I'm very happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Ling. I am the Urban Agriculture and Community Garden Program Manager for the San Francisco Recreation and Park Department. I have been here for just over 4 years now, quickest 4 years of my life. It's a great job. I really enjoy working with the Recreation and Park Department. Previously, I was with the Environment Department here in San Francisco for about 10 years. I've gotten to work on policy development, investments, grant investments, especially program management, a lot of different things in the areas of urban agriculture, community-led projects, integrated pest management, and I also got do a lot of work with the environmental justice team, especially at Department of the Environment. Equity, to me, is very different than just equality, right? Equality might mean everybody gets the same thing. Equity means that we are looking at who's in the most trouble, who needs the most support, right? That analogy of, is your house on fire or is your house not on fire? If your house is on fire, you need the fire department. If your house isn't on fire, you don't, right? I think that's really what we're looking at with a lot of our communities, that it is that dire, and anything that we can do to help, or not help, because if there are community members, you're not helping. You're helping yourself if you're helping your community, right? But anything we can do to strengthen our communities across the board and equalize the playing fields. It's been really great working for the Parks Department, being able to be a part of that. I think parks are a great equalizer, community equalizer. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ling. I'm really excited you're here, and I'm really excited to dive in. And I agree so much with what you said about equity. I think that's right on par. Patricia, can you please introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of this panel. I am Patricia Algara, and I'm the founder of Base Landscape Architecture. It's women-owned, Mexican-owned, immigrant-owned firm, of which I'm very proud. In San Francisco, we're going into year 10. And I'm also the founder of With Honey in the Heart, which is a project of the San Francisco Parks Alliance. And the whole goal of With Honey of the Heart is creating spaces for pollinators and transforming underutilized spaces in the city into places that can have really healthy habitat. So looking at, where are we getting our plants, making sure that our plants are really healthy plants that have not been exposed to any pesticides, that we're building our soils, all of those things. And I started a urban farm in Berkeley in 2009. And it was at that point, like having the urban farm, it was just like, it clicked that bees and pollinators are an integral part of having food and all of a sudden bees, you know, took over my life, my heart, and everything became about the bees. So I'm excited. You know, when I think about, I totally second what Ling has said about equity, but I also want to bring in the voice of those who don't have the voice and who I'm here to speak for, which is the insects, which we need so much. You know, all of the insects, all of the animals, all of the reptiles. Like I heard you guys talking about the frogs the other day, and you know, it's like all of those beings that are an integral part of our environment, and that we need to create and design for them. That when we're growing food and creating these gardens and creating all of it, it's not just for us to harvest, but to share in that space and to think about them, that we're creating these spaces for them so that then we can benefit from all the magical work that they do. So I'm excited to be a part of this here. And also a big shout out to the waters, who also don't get spoken about, but are very important part of our habitat. And we should make sure that we create spaces for them, for our creeks and for our rivers to run again through all the city. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you, Patricia. And we're going to get in. I have a couple questions here about the drought, actually, in particular. And we might get a chance to dive into them. But I'm really glad you brought that up. And last but certainly not least, Danielle and Isaiah, please introduce yourself to the group.
Yes. I'm Isaiah Powell. This is my fiance, Danielle Fernandez.
Yes.
And Danielle is a native of the area, and I am a newer resident here, and thankful to be here. And we came out from the East Coast in 2019, and when I coming out here, I didn't know anybody. I said, what could I do to bring something to the table, you know? And so thankfully, right across the street, there is a community garden, and we began volunteering over there. We were helping the Marin San Fran Food Bank distribute food every Saturday. And I just insinuated myself in the gardening that was going on there and building relationships with the elders. And, you know, fast forward to 2020, and we started adjacent to that community garden was a quarter-acre lot. What we've noticed a lot that happens in San Francisco, if space isn't occupied, it becomes occupied with garbage, and people dump stuff there. And you look at it, and what happens to your morale, your psychology? You know, it becomes normalized. And we said, yo, let's attack that by removing the trash and turn it into a viable food producing garden, you know. And that's how we met Thomas. And that's how, and then we met Fran and Jim, some of the first supporters. And then through Fran and Jim, we met Ling, who gave me the first instruction on fruit pruning. And then that brought us to Adam Rogers. And so, like a mycelium network under the soil, which we need, the same applies above in socially. Diversity, biodiversity. So we connected dots, linking up, and growing stronger and able to do more work and help more people. And yes, Danielle.
Yes. So Isaiah 2020 started Dragonspunk. So Dragonspunk is on its way to become a nonprofit, and we're specifically tackling these issues. So reducing blight, putting some funding into revitalizing community gardens. You know, food for people is important. But I'm going to say with Patricia, like for me, I am about habitat restoration for birds, bees, butterflies, small mammals. I want to give back what we have taken from them. If there's an opportunity to do that, I would like to do that. So you know, I added frogs across the street, put in a pond. We're raising frogs in our backyard. And I'm hoping to grow populations of amphibians and then putting in, you know, butterfly and bee habitat. and birds, and just getting people interested in the nature that's around us, because I think that is the most important, because we are losing species at an alarming rate. And I would like to try to prevent losing some species. So that's what we are all about. Thank you.
And to address equity, words, different contexts, different meanings, but in this context, equity, and I love what you're saying and what Patricia said, because that's what I think. Equity, providing equal opportunities for optimal health, equal opportunities for optimal health. And when you do that, when you have perfect selfishness, you see that you are connected with everything else. So looking out for yourself, it implies you're looking out for the environment. We're all a part of an ecosystem here. So if we're making more wetlands, we're restoring the balance that was here. This is wetlands, a lot of this is landfill we're living on. And so if you have wetlands, that's why you have frogs, you see, and you can filter out this water. That's what wetlands do. They filter, they're great. They're the liver of the ecosystem. They filter out. So equity is providing resources equitably for flora, fauna, and humans, resources that will enable each to reach their optimal and live a life of health. And because when you have the good health and you have a holistic balance, you're going to get happy, guaranteed. You're going to find that happiness. You're going to find that joie de vivre. And that's what equity means to me.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Isaiah. I got a chance to actually meet Danielle and Isaiah through Instagram. I saw Danielle's first post of what they were doing down in the Bay. Said I gotta connect. We're on the same wavelength, and so I'm really excited to get this group together. I thought you guys all raised some really valuable points about equity, and I feel like I also have to share about what I think about equity and the challenge of really interrogating and pushing ourselves to understand what that word means, right? Just because we've heard it so many times over the past year, and I don't want to lose sight of that word and the importance of equity and how we're doing our best to understand and implement in the right, correct way for our park system. So, equity for me really, so far in my role as at Southeast Area Manager and at the Parks Alliance, I really thought about access, right? Access to resources, right? Equity is about meeting groups where they are, right? Meeting groups and communities that are disadvantaged and making sure that they have the tools and the resources and the skill set necessary to get on that path, the same path that everyone has towards success. And so that was really the framework for this presentation, for this panel that I was thinking about, that I wanna push us to look into a little bit further. But I also want to set the scene a little bit first. So we're gonna get started. It's 2:50, and I don't want to. We could talk about this subject for hours, but we got a great panel here, and we got some guests that are interested to learn a little bit more from this panel, and also learn some strategies as well. So I want to set the scene. Mei-Ling, the first question is for you. You and I actually participated in a panel a couple weeks ago, and I really like the way you defined urban agriculture, because we hear urban agriculture a lot, and you drew this distinction between gardens and farms, right? There's a distinction there. They're not necessarily the same operation. And I think drawing that distinction is really important in order to address needs. So can you please help us understand the differences between gardens and farms and the term urban agriculture, right? You drew a really interesting juxtaposition. Like there's a multi-generational understanding of urban agriculture. And I really like that. Can you share that with the group?
So I think he's talking about two different points that I brought up. One is that the program title I use is a little duplicative for some people, saying community gardens and urban agriculture, because a lot of people see community gardens as just one form of urban agriculture. A lot of the community gardeners, though, that we've had operating in the city for decades and who are still some of our most dedicated volunteers today are people who started volunteering in the 60s and 70s with the People's Food Movement. And they see the word as community and community gardening as a really critically political statement. So they don't want to see the community cut from community gardening. And by shifting to these words, urban agriculture, that kind of removes the people element for some people in some way. So the reason that I use those terms together is because I'm trying to have a big tent philosophy, make sure that everybody is heard and seen. And I agree with the question about community gardens versus urban agriculture as a whole. The department has, Rec and Park, we've recently overhauled how we provide services to the community garden urban ag program. And we look at these spaces as different benefits that are coming to the public. And so we provide different resources. We have different metrics that we're looking for in these spaces. The community gardens, where people are coming together to manage the space, their own little space that's assigned, and then the rest of the space together, primarily for their own use, not for somebody else's use. The primary benefit that they're getting is community development, it's social cohesion, meeting their neighbors, having friend time, discovering the grandma that lives down the street by herself and might need some extra help during COVID or during a heat wave. Maybe somebody in one garden has become homeless and another garden member takes their mail. I see things like this happening in the gardens all the time. And that wouldn't happen unless the space is there to allow community development and community building. So we focus really principally now on community building and cohesion as the benefits that we're getting from our community garden spaces, as opposed to food security, which was the primary goal that these spaces were identifying, that these spaces provided a way for people to grow their own food that can impact food security. The reality is a lot of people aren't growing food. But where people are growing food and there is food security, it is really important that this work is happening. And by focusing on increasing community and social cohesion, increasing the spaces where people can gather, this has increased the safety and use of these sites so that they actually do have higher production. So even though we're focusing on community in the community garden spaces, we are seeing an increase in the food security metrics as well. So that's one. And then the other part of it is the difference between gardens and urban farms. A lot of people define this in many different ways. And so I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. Choose your own adventure with your language. Really happy for it. The way I use it in the department, and again, is to look at our metrics. What benefits are we trying to get and how are we applying our resources to reach those benefits? Are you growing for yourself primarily, yourself and your family? Or are you growing for other people primarily? So where people are primarily growing for other people, like at Alamini Farm, our primary food security site, there's a few other important food security farms in San Francisco as well. The way we program those sites need to focus more on the volunteers are coming into this space to participate in a food security project. So food production is a really important goal. So in those cases, I'll focus more on providing seed potatoes and making sure that we've got the right soil amendments and bringing in volunteers to help with that, as opposed to bringing volunteers to maintain communal spaces, common spaces, and keep the gathering and event ability up. Does that make sense? So different metrics for different benefits. But everybody, use your language how you want. This is how we chose to use our language to really highlight the distinction between these spaces so that we can push towards those really different benefits we're getting from the difference in use.
No, I think that is an important distinction to make, because in order to address those needs, you have to understand what their operation is, right? And what the goal of that space is. And I think you laid that out perfectly. And I'm glad you did. I think it's a great way to start the conversation. The next question is for Danielle and Isaiah. So, Mei Ling said that there are different metrics for different spaces, right? But I'm curious to know, like, what does a successful community farm or garden look like, right? So, like, how do we measure community cohesion? What are the things? What things should I look for if I go to a community farm or garden? Well, how do we measure, like, what is successful versus not successful?
Well, I think there are two components to that. There's the physical material component and the social component for a community garden, a successful community garden. The physical component are the obvious. You want excellent soil. You want biodiversity. You want an excellent soil, great soil porosity. You want to see food organically grown. You want to see an absence of chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizers. You want, on the social side, you want to see engagement. And I believe a community, much like a plant, doesn't just exist. Okay, for a lot of reasons, you have neighborhoods, but sometimes you don't have communities. Communities have to be curated. They have to be cultured or created and nurtured a lot of times. And I believe to do that, you have to have some educational component to a successful community garden. You want to empower the people to be able to do, to be able to be the verb. So you have to teach the people why organic gardening is good. You want to teach the people, hey, this is California. We have these native plants. What's the purpose of them? What's the relationship of trees to us? Trees to wildfires, trees to erosion. What's going on with the bees? You know, we can't bring in bees from Florida right now because there's a disease that's hitting up the citrus. A successful community garden is activated with people who are curious. They want to learn. They have a place to go and learn. A successful community garden is going to attract people like Mei Ling, people, knowledge bases, people like Fran and Jim, craftsmen and craftswomen to come and share. A successful community garden, I think, is much like a successful group of cells in your body. You know, the heart is composed of mad different cells. There's millions and millions of cells make the heart. You know, so a heart is the composite of all these cells that are working properly. If there's too many cells, you got cancer. You know what I mean? So a successful garden is linking up. A successful garden is going to link up to Fran because it's going to say, wow, you have the vegetation greenway there. You have some great attributes there that will strengthen what we're doing. And likewise, a successful community garden in the Bayview is in constant communication and friendship and love with other nearby community gardens. We know what each other's doing and we can help each other in times of crisis. A successful community garden is a part of a network, a robust network of like-minded individuals. And by like-minded, I mean, we want to be healthy and we want the animals around us to be healthy. And I got to say this because we're in Bayview, Umatok Village. A successful community garden is going to somehow incorporate Ohlone because they're still alive. They're actually on the rise. This is a group, this is important now. This is a group whose language was dead for 2 years and it came back. To me, that means resilience. Resilience is something we need in the gardens, like on a material level, but we can learn something from because they were stewards here before and they're still alive. And if there's any elders in the community who has them now, a successful community garden in this area is going to tap into that. And nationwide, if you're in any area where any of those old stewards are still alive, reach out, at least reach out. That's what a successful community garden is going to do. And in so doing, we can have second graders, right? By the time they 12th grade, they've already been through some harvest with grapes. They've already seen what it takes to use organic pest control. We've cultured a new generation. So when they go off into the Cornells and these agricultural institutes, they can change the paradigm That's what a successful community garden is going to do. It's going to build a community, and it's going to ensure that you don't have die-offs. But people die and then, uh-oh, it's dead. No, because everybody is strengthened with knowledge to keep the thing going. That's what I think.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I want to focus in. I heard Visitation Valley in there. As a Southeast area manager, I've gotten the pleasure to know Fran and Jim really well, and all our community partners in Visitation Valley. And I really like that you highlighted, Isaiah, what makes a community garden successful is this like-minded, passionate group of people who care about their community, right? And so the next question is for Patricia. So, San Francisco is a geographically, and one might argue demographically, diverse place. Are there neighborhoods better suited for urban agriculture or community gardens or community farms or green spaces? Are there neighborhoods that are better suited, right? So with Visitation Valley, we have an amazing group of a passionate, concerned community organizers, right? And they have successful community gardens and spaces down there. What are there certain characteristics we should be looking for in neighborhoods that aren't necessarily physical? Of those neighborhoods, in San Francisco, are there certain ones that aren't a good fit? I'm curious to push this a little bit further.
Yeah, we were talking about this before the conversation, the meeting with everybody started, and Isaiah definitely mentioned all of the great benefits that are in Visitation Valley with the climate and the sun. And I think sunshine is an important factor for growing food. And so in the neighborhoods where you have that, you definitely have that benefit, because it's you can't make up sunshine. However, that being said, there's also a lot of things that can be grown in the neighborhoods that are more on the fog side and the closer to the ocean, like all of your greens, your brassicas, like all of that can grow really well. And mushrooms, like I had in the urban farm in Berkeley, we were right on West Berkeley as the fog comes in. So even though it's the East Bay, it was like constantly gray because all the fog coming from the bay. And we had an area that was under some redwood, so it was really dark and foggy. And what we did there, which was amazing, was that we grew mushrooms. We just had like incredible mushroom crops there. So I think that you have to adapt to like what can I grow in this space? What is going to grow well? And not limit yourself to like, I must have tomatoes, because then you'll be sad if you're in San Francisco. That's not going to happen. Unless maybe in Visitation Valley that might happen, but in my neighborhood that doesn't grow so well. But I also want to put out the idea that urban agriculture is not just about the food producing, like having animals, having bees, having chickens, like all of these things are also part of urban agriculture. The processing of food, like having a small production where you take the crops and you transform it into salsas, into jams, into all these things, that is urban agriculture. Having a place where you can sell the produce, that is urban agriculture. So to me, all of these things should be taken as part of the consideration for urban agriculture. So if your neighborhood is a place where it's thick and fog and it's cold and it's windy and like it's really difficult to grow food, maybe you look at like, well, maybe we can put a little farm stand, and that creates an opportunity for urban agriculture and for having that community where people are going to come and see what's going on and see what's happening. So I think we just have to be open about what urban agriculture means. But I don't know if others have other ideas for the neighborhoods, what is best other than the sunshine and the soil.
Well, I'll say that there is a San Francisco master gardener who has developed a tomato that grows full size in San Francisco. It's not fully stable right now, but it's getting there. It's called the San Francisco Sunrise tomato. And it does produce. Also,
I want some seeds.
yes, so you can get a tomato in this town. You can, and you can grow greens anywhere. There are a lot of vegetables that prefer cooler weather, and so I think you can grow anywhere. I do say that, but I also agree with you, Patricia, that urban ag is more than food. It could be cut flowers. It could be managing the food. It could be sharing the food as well.
And I just want to jump in. I was just thinking, the foggy areas. Also, urban. What do you guys think about urban agriculture? Also, inspiring research. I know fog. They use the fog catching for water. Ways of harvesting water. I don't know how far along in Peru they had some good success with it. Maybe urban agriculture could, promote some research into these things. And then if we have a network, they're doing fog catching over there on the western side of San Francisco. Boom. Maybe we could. By having that, we collaborate and share the knowledge and information.
And I think actually, as we probably segue into what's happening right now with the drought, we really have to start thinking like in terms of the climate and in terms of increasing droughts. We have to be really radical about this. Like the time is now. The time is not in 3 years, in 5 years, or 10 years. It's going to be too late. We need to be doing this stuff now, which is going to challenge some, sometimes organizations or folks are resistant to change, or they dismiss ideas as being, too out there, too radical. But these are proven methods. Dry farming. I mean, there's people out there that are doing dry farming because they're anticipating that this is going to be the norm in California. Rain catch-alls. The last time I checked, I don't know this morning, but we can harvest rainwater. Maybe this is actually a requirement that should be on every single community garden. I mean, there should be maybe a grant for it, because that right there is the most important thing. Without water, unless we have some other kind of gardening and agricultural practices in place, we are going to be reliant on our foods being shipped in from elsewhere, thus increasing carbon emissions. Food prices are going to go up. Lack of freshness. I mean, we all love to just go outside and be able to pick our food and eat it within an hour. That's when you're going to get the most nutrients in your food. So I just wanted to add that part that, we're all pretty radical. I know all of us here are. We're into all these things that a lot of people might be like, oh, whatever, but I think it's our responsibility to really set the pace and be introducing these ideas. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to share this information with a group like us. If we don't know the information, then we can go seek it out, because people are really advocates for this.
No, I'm actually really glad we did bring up the drought, right? Because I'm thinking about shared resources, right? And as we segue here into our second part of the conversation, I think it'll be extremely difficult, for groups to navigate the climate emergency and the climate crisis, right? But I am in support of making sure that if groups need, community groups, those who are interested in starting community farms or gardens, that they can get the resources they need, such as maybe what Isaiah was referencing, something to harness the fog, right? That they need that installed on their community garden. But even so, my understanding is that you need a knowledgeable, skilled person at the community garden to be able to install it, one, but also take care of it, right? And be there to make sure that the garden is running properly. And so, Isaiah, you mentioned earlier that it's such a successful component of a community garden or community farm is education, right? If we want to make sustainable community farms and spaces, right, for future generations, we have to make sure there's a community out there that understands, you know, these limitations, right, and has the skill set to nurture a community farm and build social cohesion, right? So I'm curious, like, what skills do you need in a community farm, right, in a community garden? What skills, and this is a question for Isaiah, what kind of skills do you need, right, to make those community gardens successful?
Long-term planning.
Commitment.
Yes, if commitment as a skill, or resiliency. I think you need, even, you know, more than the skills, you have to recognize. I think this really helps. If you recognize your place in the way I see it, through what I've been studying historically and stuff, I think humans, if there's a purpose for humans, we all have our individual thing. Yes, I know. But I think our purpose is to be stewards, honestly. I think like everything on all the animals and the plants, they do something, man. And I'm learning this more and more every day. And Danielle actually has been one of the biggest forces in my life to inspire me to study this. And animals, man, even the ones you don't think, the opossums and the raccoons, you know, they are garbage men. The maggot is essential. So why are humans here is a question, you know what I mean? And I think with our particular sets of abilities that some say differentiate us from the other animals, I think our duty is to be stewards. And if you recognize that and you believe that,
you're going to do everything that you need to do to make the vision happen. You know, I think we're all visionaries too. We have these like long range goals that we see like an oasis. We know what it takes for a society to work. And I think the skills are, you know, continuing to be a visionary and being, you know, having a positive vibration. So, you know, a lot of people will try to tear you down and negate and dismiss and all of that, but you have to rise above that and keep your vision forward and only align yourself with people who have that same kind of vibration. Then, you know, it's like having intuition to know what needs to happen. Like you just kind of trust, like, you know what I mean? And you go seek out and you're resourceful. So because we are so connected to all these wonderful people, if we need something, we have a question or what have you, or we just want to run an idea by someone, we have everybody there. So we have the gift of perseverance, the gift of intuition, the gift of connecting with people, and the gift of like really a commitment, because anytime you want to start a project, you know, you have to commit to it. It takes a long time, and you may have your job. I work a full-time job. Then I come home and then we're imagining Dragonspunk, and then we're imagining Latona Garden and things to go on at Adam Rogers and things, It's like a full-time plus a full-time job. Like it doesn't just stop when you get off of work. It's like we're all trying to make like reimagine a new paradigm in this world, and it doesn't just stop. And sometimes we put our needs on the back burner, you know, so anyway.
And to piggyback on that, you got to have interpersonal relationship skills.
Yeah.
I think is one of the hugest. And I'm saying that because the planting and the biology aspect, you learn, you go to YouTube, you ask questions. I love experimenting, okay? Don't let education stop you from learning. And don't trust science, because science is the reason why the Midwest has soil depletion. That was science. You know, people from these big universities went down and said, yo, chemical fertilizer, yeah, use it, love it, be addicted to it. Now they're like, oh, shoot, what the heck? So I'm saying you got to read science, common sense. You got to take in information and filter.
Yeah.
And you have to but you got to get your hand in dirt to
Yeah.
try things out. I love to go and do the experiment and then have some, oh man, you can't do that, that's wrong. All right, but let me see it and viscerally see that it's wrong. That's, you know, the gardening part. But yes, the interpersonal relationship is one of the hugest. It's one of the huge. You got to know how to talk to people. Here's a quick example. Latona, we wanted to put, so, you know, at Latona, it's this little slip of land there. We have a beehive there. And then one of the neighbors is like, oh, shoot. Well, the dog, oh, what about my dog? Should we ask the neighbors? And I'm thinking, well, we planted bee attracting plants there before the hive. So there's going to be bees there. And guess what? A hive, they go out to forage, you know, but you don't want to yell. You want to know how to massage that, to nicely educate and then turn people around, you know? So interpersonal relationships, knowing how to navigate, knowing how to connect with people like you.
Yeah.
So
you're always going to run into conflict. You're always going to run, you know, it's just the way it is. We have egos, there's egos to deal with, there's people, whatever it is. You just have to, like, again, going back to what we're saying, is not to take it personally and to just keep on moving forward and keep on moving forward, because yeah, so that's
yeah, if I may jump in and second that, I think that the willingness to experiment is a really big part of it, because you have to take that risk, because it's probably something that hasn't been done, or there's going to be a lot of people that don't like it because it's different than what was there before, or because they don't understand it or whatever. And that's been the experience, for example, with the Pollinator Boulevard, where we took out the lawn on the median of Dolores Street and put in plants that are they're not all native, but they're mostly native, and plants that are drought tolerant and are all habitat for pollinators. And a lot of people were not happy with it, right? They were like, what are you doing? This is a historic median. It's always been lawn. You can't take out the lawn. And it's like, no, you know, and maybe even if it is, like, we have to change it. Like, that's not, and then also people who don't like it because at the end of the summer, it looks dry. And so people are like, this is dead. And it's like, no, it's not dead. It's just dormant because they're drought tolerant plants. And so getting people to get used to a different vision of how a garden is supposed to look like, or how, you know, we take care of a space, and what success means, right? Like, we were talking about this. And so for me, success of the pollinator garden is that we have been able to find 11 species of native bees in the middle of, like, Market Street in Dolores, and that there's always hummingbirds, and that we have bumblebees nesting in there. That to me is success. It's like, it's amazing, right? And we're not necessarily growing food. There are a lot of medicinal herbs, and, you know, I do go and harvest them, but it's quote unquote, maybe you wouldn't call it urban agriculture, but I would argue that it is urban agriculture. And we have had, like, one of the neighbors came by one day, she told me that she had to hand pollinate her tomatoes. And since the garden's been installed, she doesn't have to do that anymore because the bees are there. So that's success, right? So you just have to experiment and be patient with yourself and with others who may not like what you're doing and may not understand it, and it may take a while, but you have you just keep showing up and doing it.
No, absolutely. And I love all the points that were just brought up. I heard being personable. That's a big point. I heard collaboration. That's something I preach all the time as Southeast Area Manager with my community partners, and especially addressing things like equity. People bring up this word all the time, but as if we can collaborate, if we can get together, we can solve some of these systemic structural barriers, right, that are so present if we work together, right? I'm not going to rely on one person, one organization, or one institution to get it done. And we're at 3:21 and we have 10 more minutes, but I want to pivot to one last question before we open it up to our audience, which is, you know, we know that to address these systemic structural barriers that are still so present in our park system and in urban farms and gardens, in our country at large. What strategies can we use? Because we know people are curious. I know there are people are curious who want to get involved, right? But they might not have the resources to do it. How do we bring those people in? How do we create a path to bring them in, right? So, and I want to lean into my what I was saying earlier, that we shouldn't rely on one institution to get it done, right? I'm not banking on Joe Biden and his administration to get it done single-handedly, right? But where do we start? So where do we start to address these issues, right? Does it start, Isaiah, with an educational program at SFUSD, or Unified School District? Does it mean free water for community gardens and farms in Bayview, Hunters Point? I wanna get to that a little bit more, right? And how do we address the cost, right? How do we bring people in? Because I know that there are people out there that are passionate, that are interested in doing this work, right? And we want to make sure they have the time and resources to do it, right? And I'm curious, is there something? And this is a question for all our panelists. How do we affect change, right? How do we make sure that everyone has resources to get involved?
It's a big thing, a very big. There's many. So one, if you're able, thank God, there's a particular situation for me where I'm able to go and get things started. Someone to initiate. It's just like the high school dance. No one's going to get out and dance until that bold couple of kids go out and then everybody feels comfortable. Get started, meaning, hey, one easy thing, and we saw some success with this, and I think all of us know Brett and what he's about to do with plastics. If not, ask some questions about that. There's garbage in your neighborhood. Go pick it up. That's one easy thing that's good for getting people together. It's something easy to do. I've seen it happen. Danny's done it here in Bayview. People come together. Now you have a group, right? And you have this momentum building up. That's one thing. You said, Thomas, meet people where they are. We live right now, like I'm a little older, so people are on the smartphones with the different medias, social medias. You have the Instagrams and all that. We have to kind of utilize that in a way, right? Because we met through these techniques, optics.
Yeah.
And please don't mistake this for political theatrics, but life is but a stage, as someone said. And so you got to have optics, man. You want to take something small, a small piece of plot, something small, but do it extraordinarily beautifully. Attract eyes, attract people, okay? Use the social medias to tell this narrative, because people are attracted to the story, man. It's the story of it that gets at them. Because last year it was the political turmoil, people was getting shot, and people say, hey, what can I do, man? I don't know what to do. I don't want to just protest. I want to do something. The energy's there, channel it. And a story is a great way to do that. If you have the ability to link up with the Baycat, young people with cameras who love to do this, maybe some young students in the film, tell this story. It's going to attract, it's going to help build momentum and all the pieces you need. Because I want to do this. I want to go to Unified School District right now. I have a teacher, and I have somebody who wants to build gardens on the roofs up there of the schools. That super fun site, Bret Hart. What about putting some, but if we have some momentum going on, maybe Ling and Thomas, Patricia know someone in the school district that'll help us cut through the red tape. And push these things forward, because the people are ready to do it. We know people right now, the staff, we can get started right now at Bret Hart, putting some stuff on the roofs right now. And then we can film this. We can make a Baycat TV show. People are going to get hyped. And then that's when you can talk to the politicians. They want to, have the good optics, get them on board. We must use these lemons and make this lemonade. You got to be creative, and you got to know how to use your illusion.
Ling, Patricia, is there something you guys are thinking about in particular with regards to making?
Sure. Yeah. I'll add that I love Isaiah's energy and his ability to start new things. Not everybody have this kind of leadership kind of energy that Isaiah does. There are a lot of different things that many of these community projects need. They need hands on the ground. They need people to help them fundraise. There is definitely a project in your neighborhood that is looking for some help. So I would say if you are brand new to this and are looking for a way to get into supporting community development and community land management projects and haven't done it before, great way is just get involved with what's happening in your neighborhood. Meet the people who are doing the work, build those community connections, as Isaiah and Patricia have also pointed out, are so important for success, so that you can have other people to help you. I think that's one of the easiest things that you can do. It's a little tricky right now with COVID, but as we come out of COVID, volunteering opportunities are going to go way up. And we've been having a lot of interest in increasing our volunteer events. And we're planning on doing some big volunteer increasing this fall when things get back to normal. For the best way to find out how to volunteer for my projects, you could email community gardens, plural, all one word, community gardens @sfgov.org and find and get on our list of upcoming events. We will do a lot of volunteering about that. We post our volunteering to that. And then kind of a separate thing, I wanted to point out a way that we're working, thank you, Sarah. I wanted to point out a way that we are working on increasing equity and engagement and access, materials, resources, the availability for people to be creative. One of the things that we do is because we have such a big system, I can balance the needs and the opportunities that are coming in. So if I know that I've got a garden full of seniors that just don't have the physical strength or the income to replace plots on their own, I will direct them to opportunities that I have incoming to that garden. So that's one thing I can do as a system manager with dozens of gardens. Another thing that I can do is look at how we develop our policies. And are we developing policies that are pathway to yes, or are we developing policies that are blanket? We've shifted away from developing blanket policies and I've started looking at more at opportunities where we can let the neighbors accurately and actively reflect their communities in the spaces. So instead of trying to say, this policy is going to affect every site, we'll say, this is how we can make this thing happen on this site through MOU processes and other engagement methods. It is higher touch. It does take a lot of time. So this, again, right back to Isaiah and Danielle, it's people power. We need a lot of people power, but I think that's the only way you can do it. Really getting in there and being high touch and looking at pathway to yes, looking at your policies, looking at the metrics that you're trying to gain and making sure that you're really matching the benefits and the outcomes with the people that are there. In a very specific way, one of the things that we've done in our program is focus our metrics and our policies away from focusing on what people are taking out of the gardens and instead focusing on what they're putting into the gardens. So that is a way that we measure social cohesion. We measure how many times people come on the site. We measure how many events. We measure how many activities happen on the site instead of trying to count the number of pounds of food coming out of the site.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ling. Guys, we're at the end of our time with Patricia. I want you to chime in before we all.
I'll be quick. I'm just gonna say one thing because I support like what Ling and what everything that's been said is great and different opportunities. But I do think that we can make a big change in our schools. And I'm gonna say this because the more that we say it, the more that we hear it, we'll become more comfortable with this idea. But I think that we need to change our bathrooms to composting toilets and reduce the amount of fresh, clean drinking water that we're flushing down the toilet every time we go to the bathroom. And if we start this in our schools, that's a huge amount of water that will be saved. And then all of these kids will grow up with this idea and it will become normal. And then we can have this water be used for other resources. So I'm all for composting toilets and for all of us to feel comfortable with that. And that's what I wanted to share.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, this conversation deserves honestly more than 1 hour. It needs a couple days. It needs a couple weeks. And we're at the end of our time. But if you have any questions for our panelists, please reach out to them. It's an amazing group. And, you know, Philip Wynn has already done the pleasure of going into the chat and sharing information about our community partner network. These are groups that I work with every single day, right? So groups like Danielle and Isaiah and Patricia that are on the ground and doing the work to make our city, our parks, our community gardens a better place. So I invite you to please go into the community partner network and see how you can volunteer. And like Mei Ling said, there's always groups that need support. So please find one in your neighborhood and get involved. It's a great way to give back. You know, I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. You will receive a link in your email to do a feedback survey. But thank you so much for coming to the session. And again, this deserves so much longer of a conversation, but let's keep it going, okay? Because this is really important. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming to the session. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you
Great
guys.
seeing all of you.
Yeah, we'll be meeting each other very soon.
Looking forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Tom.
See you.
See you.